Okay, welcome everyone. It is 2 o'clock, Christmas Cabinet. So we'll broadcast live via the County Council's website and archive so you can view it afterwards. Meeting is being held remotely. Start with, I'll just do a quick roll call to make sure all Cabinet members can see and hear everyone else. And we're actually starting off today alphabetically. So Blunty. Your microphone's off, Rich.
Yeah, Richard Blunt, lead member for Adult Social Care.
Very good. Welcome, Richard. Lee.
Yes, here, Nick.
BP.
Here, next to you.
Trevor.
Yep.
Byron.
Yes.
Louise.
Yes.
Richard Shepherd.
Yes, I'm here.
Deborah.
Here.
Okay, thank you. So to help it run smoothly, can we keep microphones off unless you're speaking? Use that little raised yellow hand function when you want to speak, and remember to switch it off when you've finished. At the end of each debate on each report, I'll ask you if you're all assenting to the decision. If you don't want to assent to the decision, let it be no, because then we'll have to do a roll call to vote. But to expedite the meeting, if I don't see anyone disagree, we'll just take it by assention. So the next agenda item is apologies, and we have none. So agenda item 1 is minutes, pages 3 to 12. I move the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of November 2020 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Blake?
Leader, I'll second them.
Thank you. All happy? Excellent, thank you. Urgent items, we have none. Declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Richard, I think me and you should declare a personal interest in item 9 as members of North West Leicestershire District Council. Are you happy with that, Rich?
Yes, that's fine, Nick.
Okay, so we have no others. So if we go straight to 4, which is the MTFS 2021-22 and 24-25, this is on pages 13 to 14, and there's a supplementary report, pages 3 to 60. So as I said, this is the MTFS. Have a look at the supplementary report. The proposals were considered by overview and scrutiny in January, and will be considered by overview and scrutiny in January, alongside a public consultation. Please go to our website, those members that are watching, leave your comments. We've got Chris Tambini, Director of Corporate Resources, to present the report, and then I'll go straight to Byron as lead member for resources. So hopefully you're on, Chris.
I am, leader.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the report sets out the draft MTFS for 2020-21 to 2023-24. The funding position in the report is based on the spending review. And the spending review did contain a fair amount of detail. So although we were expecting the local government settlement later this week, we're not expecting that to change the position too much. It is worth noting, however, though, that we will receive over the coming kind of weeks and months more detail on various revenue and capital grants. Given the overall position of the kind of national finances and the level of national kind of public borrowing, that's coupled with rising demand for services and rising costs locally, I think there's no doubt that the council is going to be in for a tough few years. And as ever, our position is compounded by our low funding position, which, based on recent announcements from the government, it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon. The really positive news is that we can set a balanced budget for next year, and a balanced budget without any emergency savings package or any large take from reserves. That clearly isn't the case for many other upper tier authorities. And the main reason that we can do that is that we didn't come into the current year with any stored up financial problems. The pandemic has cost the council a substantial amount of money this year, but it's been largely offset by extra central government grants and also some of the spending controls that we brought in over the summer. The medium term does look challenging, and for the first time in many years, the budget is only balanced for next year only. Thereafter, a gap opens up, and by year 4 of the MTFS, we've got a gap of 36 million, and that's despite the current MTFS including £30 million of more detailed savings that have been identified in the report. I do want to mention a couple of specific pressures. The first one is special education needs. This has clearly been a pressure for a number of years, and we do have a major transformation programme that's in place at the moment. But despite that and the significant savings that is generating, we do expect to end the MTFS period with over a £30 million cumulative deficit in terms of special education needs. And although we are working very hard locally to contain that deficit, we are very dependent on central government to reform the system. But our major concern is that we don't expect those reforms will be in place for a number of years. So I think that will be an issue and something we're going to need to watch over the next couple of years. The second pressure is capital. There's a huge demand on the capital programme, and for the second or third year, we've got a very large capital programme in the order of 450 million. And that is largely driven by the infrastructure bill associated with new housing, principally roads and schools. And again, housing growth is not a demand that we expect to reduce over the short term or indeed the medium term. The final point I wanted to make is the MTFS is based on 2% council tax. That there is scope to take the 3% adult social care precept over the next 2 years. It could be taken in all next year or split over 2 years. That's all I was going to say by way of introduction, and the recommendations are on the order paper. Thank you, Chris. Byron?
Yes, this is going to be one of our toughest roll forwards of the MTFS that we've seen in many years. Unlike previous years, we've been able to set a balanced budget only for 1 year, and previous years we've been able to do it for at least 2, and that's left savings still to be made in years 3 and 4. So it's our difficulties are getting more acute. Much of it that's due to the coronavirus, although much of the overspend due to that was reimbursed to us by the government. They didn't reimburse it all, and we've had to find the balance from other resources, which principally means that we've had to save extra money in our spending, but are very tight controls, and also by cancelling some of our capital program that we had planned. Overall, the 4 years, there's a cumulative deficit opening up of 92 million. 26 million of that will be related to the SEND budget, which is in the direct school grant. It's outside the revenue grant, but which we could ultimately be liable for if the government won't reimburse us. And since the problem with that is due to the great number of education, health and care plans which are now coming forward, and lack of resources being given to us through the direct school grant by the government, then it's really down to them to resolve the problem. But the balance of 66 million, which is spread over years 2, 3, and 4, has got to be closed somehow. Now, it can be partly closed by taking this extra money for social care, which clearly we also need, and the government are allowing us to increase the council tax by a further 3% on top of the 2% capped amount, which we've got built in. And the question will arise, well, should we take all of that next year, or should we spread it over the 2 years as they've indicated we could? The consultation, which we're launching on Wednesday, the 16th, which will run till the 17th of January, will address that point, and we want to hear what the public think, and we hope we get a large number of contributions. I have to say, though, it's my recommendation that we do take it all in the first year, if only to provide us with the maximum revenue in order to close the funding gap. But nevertheless, we must listen to what the public have to say, because ultimately they have to find the money. So I'm happy to move the motions on the order paper, and then we'll move forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron. Richard Shepherd.
Thank you, Chairman. I second the motion. I agree with Byron's view on the 3%. And I would just particularly like to draw attention to, again, as he did, the consultation being launched tomorrow. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Blake Payne.
Thank you, Leader. Chris, I have a question, if I may. Could you just explain to us, so it's on record, what foregoing the 3% adult social care precept actually means in real terms, i.e. how much cash? And what difference would it make if we took it over the 2 years? I think we need to be clear that when the government talk about local government spending power, or indeed when they stand at the dispatch box and talk about allowing or giving local government more money to deal with things, what they're actually saying, they're allowing us to raise a levy locally to contribute towards some of the funding that we need. And this is actually an example of that. So could you explain, so it's on the record, what foregoing the 3% adult social care precept means and what it actually means to us in real terms if we were to spread it over 2 years?
Right. In terms of the adult social care precept, each 1% is a bit over £3 million. So if you took the full 3% in year one, you'd I think it's about 9.5 million extra you'd get in year one. So by splitting it, and you can split it kind of 2 and 1 or 1 and 2, depending on how you want to do it, or even kind of 0 and 3. So you can kind of work out the maths that's the way it would fall. So you could in effect defer it till the following year, or split it 3 and get £3 million extra this year, 6 million next year, or 6 million this year and 3 million the year after. So there's various ways you can kind of cut it. The money does need to be spent on adult social care, but to be honest, there are acute demands in terms of adult social care. A lot of the cost increases that have arisen in terms of the pandemic were in terms of PPE and other costs we are expecting will flow through into next year. So there's no real issue around spending it on adult social care.
Yes, I mean, I was going to ask you a similar question. So although the government's been relatively generous in compensating us for the costs of COVID, they haven't completely covered the costs of what we've spent. And as everybody knows, the main costs of COVID have fallen on the elderly. We have responsibility for the elderly, so our costs are higher than what we recovered and have been spent on the elderly. So I'm not complaining about that. It's right and proper that we should do that. So in my view, also, I'd be inclined to go for the 3% straight away. The other question I wanted to ask you, Chris, when you talk about the capital programme of X million pounds, that is money we have to lay out. And I presume, Chris, that most of that money, or at least a majority of that money, we then need to recoup through Section 106 agreements, because a lot of the capital money is being spent to help with developments. Is that right?
If you look at the breakdown of the capital programme, so it's 450 million in total over 4 years. In the order of a bit over 200 million relates to environment and transport, and then clearly the vast majority of that is around transport schemes. So there's a big element of the environment and transport programme that will be funded by Section 106 in time, but clearly with Section 106 it generally comes in after the event, so there is that kind of forward funding, but there's a significant amount of money that will be funded from developer contributions of some sort over the next 4 years.
It would be also true to say that not only is it highways that we have to forward fund to get back on Section 106, would it also be schools?
Yeah, there would be. In terms of the current MTFS, there are some schools that are or extensions that are funded by kind of 106. Again, from memory, I think we're anticipating that over the next 15 or 20 years, there could be upwards of 20 new schools that would need to be funded by developer contributions. And again, you're correct, Leader, that would be forward funded by the county council, repaid back by developer contributions over time.
This would be a particular problem, would it not, Chris, in two-tier areas where the lower tier authority has the power of planning and to sign the Section 106s, and yet the upper tier authority has to spend the money at the moment with no guarantee that we'll get it back unless they sign up to a deal?
It is a particular issue in two-tier areas where the planning levers are with the district council, and we're heavily dependent on the district council to kind of use those to make sure that our funding does come in for those big infrastructure projects that you mentioned in terms of road and schools. So yes, that's correct.
Yeah, it is important we get a guarantee really from the planning authorities that they will deliver on the Section 106s, because we're spending the money on behalf of the residents of Leicestershire, but we haven't got a guarantee as such that we'll get the money back in from the Section 106 agreements. That's why we would need an agreement, surely.
I'd completely agree. And if you look back over the years, the scale of housing growth in Leicestershire has been quite low. We managed to manage that risk through kind of separate agreements, but we are looking at now whether we need a policy for the whole county council in terms of how we can manage that risk around developer contributions, given the scale of housing growth and the fact that we think there's going to be, well, we know there's going to be significant infrastructure required over the next 20 years. Our kind of best estimate of the amount of infrastructure that we funded through 106 or developer contributions is in the order of 600 million over the next kind of 15 or 20 years. So a significant risk. So I would agree with you that we do need some kind of policy in terms of working with districts.
Yes, we should develop one as soon as possible, in my view. Right, so no more speakers. So we've got moved by Byron Road, seconded by Richard Shepherd. Can I ask if you're all in favour of what was moved and seconded? I am. Good, thank you very much. That's agreed, so we don't need to have a formal vote on it. Agenda item 5, Melton Mowbray Distributor Road South and Melton Northern Sustainable Neighbourhood Draft Master Plan. This is on pages 15 to 20. There's a supplementary report, pages 3 to 22. It provides an update on the current position on the delivery of the southern section of the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road and the development of master plans for the Melton Northern Sustainable Neighbourhood and Southern Sustainable Neighbourhood. So note there's a supplementary report has been circulated to members. It is published on the website. Can we also note that we've received representations from Joe Orson, who's the leader of Melton Borough Council. These were sent in today, but they are appended to the order paper, and I know you've all read them. I've also received, just to record, an email 20 minutes ago from Alicia Cairns, the Member of Parliament. I've not had a great deal of time to read it, but I will read it, so if we note that. So first of all, I'm going to take John Sinnott, the Chief Executive. Then after him, I'm going to come over to you, Chris, again to talk about money. And then finally, I'll ask Cabinet Lead members to speak. So first of all, over to you, Chief.
Thank you, Leader. Members will be aware this is an issue which has had a difficult history, but does need to be resolved now. And in trying to do that, we're grateful to Homes England for the extended deadline. And in coming hopefully to a decision, it also has to be noted, I would suggest, that a disproportionate amount of senior officer time has been spent on this issue, particularly over the last 2 years. Members will recall the last time the HIF grant was discussed at Cabinet, which was in June. County Council's concerns remained that the South neighbourhood proposed by Melton Borough Council was not a financially viable development. The southern leg of the MMDR is intended to serve that neighbourhood, and so the financial viability of the development has always been key. Apart from government grant, the cost of constructing the road will have to be met from developer contributions, which is what you've just been alluding to, and so it is a critical issue for all concerned. Since that meeting in June, we initiated some very constructive discussions with the developers, involved Melton Borough Council, kept Homes England informed, and commissioned some external viability work. I would, Leader, like to pay tribute to Jana Walker from the E&T department, who's led the discussions on our behalf and has done a first-class job. As members will see from paragraph 38 of the report and subsequently, there are changes which can be made in the development layout, including additional housing, changes to the school sites and to the line of the road, which show the South neighbourhood is a viable development proposal. So we are now in a position to put forward a set of recommendations to allow the County Council to accept the HIF grant. Some of those recommendations are technical because legal agreements need to be completed, but the recommendations require Melton Borough Council to approve agreement, at least in principle, to those recommendations, to ensure that the Borough Council is adequately resourced to carry out its local planning authority role in managing a major development, and to offer an appropriate contribution towards mitigation of the financial risk to the County Council, which will remain in any event. A letter today from the leader of the Borough Council is recognised in an amended motion which is in the order paper, and I share the view expressed in Part I that it is disappointing and appears to misunderstand the County Council's position. The recommendations also refer to the draft master plan for the Melton North neighbourhood following the report to Cabinet last month. Frankly, we have to avoid being in a position next year when the business case for the northern and eastern leg of the road is finalised, similar to that we have found ourselves in with the south neighbourhood this time round. And it's right for the County Council to emphasise the importance of robust master planning. Finally, the report points out the importance of taking stock of the planned growth across Leicestershire, not just in Melton, and how that can be financed in a sustainable way. As you've just mentioned, Lady, you've asked for a policy to be drawn up accordingly, and that is also referred to in these recommendations. It will be reported to the Council in February as part of the MTFS process. If I could pause there, Leader, perhaps you could call Chris to talk about the financial context more widely.
Yep, thanks, Chris. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Just going to add a few words. If I could just start by saying, I suppose this isn't just about the sustainability of the County Council. It's also about making sure that new communities generate the funding so they have the right infrastructure. And to be honest, you can't have one without the other. The report does set out the costs of the Southern Melton scheme, and the work indicates that the cost of the roads and the schools in the Southern development will be in the order of £70 million. Of that, we should receive about £15 million from the HIF in terms of grant. So in effect, we've got £55 million worth of development, which is dependent on developer contributions of some sort. And within that 55 million, I suppose that's the context in which Melton Borough Council have indicated they'll underwrite £1 million, so leaving the balance for the county council. Officers and I personally are comfortable. As I say comfortable, I accept that we must underwrite the construction risk associated with that £70 million worth of schemes and development. But it's difficult to take the funding risk as well without there being consequences for other parts of the county council. And if we do so for Melton, I expect we'll run into affordability issues in other parts of the county when schemes come forward. And it's probably also worth remembering that we're just talking about the southern bit, the southern sort of HIF development here. The County Council has already committed to the north and east in terms of the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road. And we should get some further information on the overall cost of that in the spring. Just one final point. I don't particularly want to repeat what I've said in terms of the previous report. We do have a large capital programme, 450 million. Of this, 200 million is for environment and highways. And I suppose if you look at that 200 million, you look at the major schemes that's funding, that is only really funding major schemes within Melton. It's not funding any major schemes in other parts of the county. So it kind of shows you the scale of the challenge we face budgetarily to kind of finance some of these major schemes as development comes forward in other districts.
Yeah, so really what you're saying is we're 55 million short in the round. So what we really want is a guarantee from the Borough Council that they will collect in the Section 106 money from third parties, so we can then reinvest that 55 million in other parts of Leicestershire. That's really what it is, isn't it? So if we get it back, we can use it again and again and again for the benefit of, say, Charnwood, Blaby, Northwest, Oadby Wigston. That's true, isn't it?
That's exactly right. If we get the money back in, we can use that cash flow to cash flow equivalent projects in other parts of the county. Yeah.
So it's the principle we want to establish, that we want to benefit everywhere in Leicestershire with our forward funding. So we can't just forward fund one and write it off. Otherwise, everybody else would have to suffer.
Yeah, that's true, and I suppose it's worth putting the context in. We're not talking about a cap of 55 or 54 million pounds. We're not talking about that level of cap, because this kind of investment will take place over a long period of time. And generally, you won't build the school until at least we know the houses are coming out of the ground and some houses have been built. So the only real bit of forward funding is the road. The road does have to go in first. So the risks around the other development are a lot less. So we're not talking about, I say, £55 million cap. We're talking about a cap much lower than that, but much higher than £1 million, clearly.
That's why we tasked Jana to go, and she has done good work. Let's place her on record again, to go and ensure that the development is sustainable. And when we say sustainable, means that there is sufficient Section 106 plus say 10 or 15% to be able to fund what is required, because we're not in the business of just building blocks of houses. We build communities. Is that right?
That's correct. And Jan has done some really good work, I must admit. I mean, the whole road and the route of the road has had to be changed as part of this latest bit of master planning. And obviously the price has gone up by about £5 million from the previous estimate. But it is a very good bit of work, and it does show that there are risks with it, but it does show that the southern neighbourhood is viable if it's managed correctly in terms of planning terms from here on in.
Sure. And it's also crucial moving forward, Chris, that when other boroughs come along, we want to engage with them as early as humanly possible to make sure that any development they're proposing, and we're not opposed to any development, that it's sustainable. That would be true, wouldn't it? To get in there early with them and work on it.
Well, I think what you said is exactly true. I think the key is to start the engagement with districts at a very early stage, because each development is going to be different. It's going to be slightly different. It's going to need a different kind of package of support. So early engagement is really important, as is the principle that districts got to work with us to underwrite that funding risk, because
Sure.
the construction risk, we've got to accept, but there's going to be an awful lot of construction risk as well.
So early engagement and a commitment to want to work together to achieve what we've got, the county's got to build, but B, to make sure there's sufficient funding in there to fund it, because the government aren't going to give it us. So we have to rely on Section 106, don't we?
We do, and generally when the government does give us some money, it's only going to be part of it, and the balance will be 106 or developer funded of some sort. So yes.
So again, Chris, the new policy which I promise we'll develop is crucial.
Completely agree. If we didn't have that kind of policy, I think we'd end up doing development within maybe 2, maybe maximum of 3 districts, and then we'd find we have affordability issues.
Thank you. Back to the Chief.
Just to emphasise that point, if I may, that principle of early engagement will be an important part of the policy. And it's fair to put on the record that we are already, not least through the growth unit, having very constructive discussions with North West and indeed with Blaby and Charnwood.
Thank you. Well, having heard all that, I will formally move the motion on the order paper, and I think I'm calling Trevor.
Thank you, Leader. I think what we're dealing with here is of fundamental and vital importance to every district and borough council in Leicestershire. And in formally seconding the motion, I really do want to put on record the fact that our growth unit and Jana has worked very hard indeed with a deadline, because remember, as the strategic authority, we're also responsible for the HIF bid, which is and will be a deal breaker here. And we need to bring this in and home, and it's important that we do this on behalf of Melton. And I think that both sets of officers have worked more recently and done very well. It's an absolutely unprecedented amount of growth that we are going to deliver in the long run. And can I also say that this sort of thing under 5G on the order paper, we will be consulting, and I, as chairman of MAG, will most certainly be taking those thoughts along to the MAG meeting tomorrow. Thank you, Chairman.
So you formally seconded the motion, Trevor?
Yes, I do formally second.
We'll go to Byron Rhodes.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you all for putting the case forward in a very positive way. And I followed that discussion very closely. And the important thing is that we reach agreement with the Borough Council, and subsequently with further projects in the future, we reach agreement with the other districts and boroughs as well. And that requires trust on both sides. And clearly the difficulty which can arise is where the district or borough council are the planning authority, and they have the power, under pressure possibly, to vary the Section 106 parts of the agreement to our disadvantage. and we have to be sure that that won't happen. So part of the in paragraph 57 of the paper, I noticed that one of the things we're asking Melton Borough Council to do is to reasonably underwrite any shortfall where the county council's developer contributions are rejected. Now, one would hope that the circumstances do not arise where they are rejected, and so that clause doesn't have to actually come into operation. So the question is how that is done and the degree to which it is done. But I think the motion that has been put forward this afternoon is a reasonable approach to this particular measure that needs to be taken at this time in order to get the plan for building this road and the further housing off the ground. And I recognise that there are some further discussions to take place later on in the week before we have actually, as it were, a deal which can confirm that everything will go ahead. So I'm happy to support the motion this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Final speakers, Blake Payne.
Thank you, Leader. A lot of the points that I wanted to make have already been very eloquently covered by colleagues. Clearly, the scale of the financial implications of not coming to an agreement upon the county council are there for all to see. We spoke about it just now and at previous meetings. What I wanted to put on record is my personal willingness, and I know it's your willingness too, to achieve a position where we can move on and actually deliver this southern relief road. I remember being lead member of the department in the pre-planning for the northern and the eastern sections, and there's a distinct difference between the northern and the eastern sections and this southern section. The case for the northern and eastern sections in transport terms were well made. We also had a member of parliament in Sir Alan Duncan that was well embedded and integrated into the Westminster system. And we were fortunate to receive the blessing of, I think, a £49 million grant towards that particular section. This southern section is a discretionary part of the road. In transport terms, I don't think the case has absolutely been proven it's necessary, but of course it's nice to have and it would finish the job, so to speak. So we'd like to deliver it, but there's a cost to that, and there's a cost to the rest of the county if we cannot come to some accommodation with the borough and district, i.e. the planning authority, as to how we're going to recoup the costs of financing that southern section of the road. So it's imperative that we continue to talk to the planning authority to work on an agreement as far as we can to get those finances set so we can actually get on and deliver this road. I encourage us to keep discussion, and I will support the motion as it stands. Thank you, Leader.
Great. So we've no more speakers. It was moved by myself and seconded by Trevor. Can I just take a show of hands in favour? Thank you very much. That was agreed by everyone. We're now going to move on to Network Management Plan Refresh, pages 21 to 168. It's Cabinet's approval of the Network Management Plan. Anne Carruthers, Director of E&T, is here. Take us through the report, then I'll be going to Trevor as the lead member. So it's over to you, Anne.
Good afternoon, Leader. The Network Management Plan sets out how we propose to fill our network management duty as the Highway Authority to, in effect, manage our network effectively. Our previous plan was approved in 2014, and I'm sure, as you'll appreciate, demands and pressures on the network have significantly changed since that time, and some of the objectives we're seeking to achieve have also changed, such as addressing climate change, carbon reduction, technological advances as well. The refreshed approach that's set out in the report today has been developed and structured following government's latest thinking, in that we have a high-level strategy and policy which sets out the wider objectives and approach, and below that the Network Management Plan, which includes our operational detail of how we'll implement that policy and strategy. Those documents are set out, appended A and B to the report before you today. In summary, our approach is focused around four main themes, and that's understanding the network and its use, how we manage the network in relation to new development and growth, something you've just been talking about, how we manage the network in response to planned and unplanned events, so that's like roadworks or accidents, etc., and how we manage demand on the network. We have undertaken engagement on this plan before you. That's with key stakeholders, including emergency services, the utility companies, district authorities, as well as the Environment and Transport Scrutiny Committee, and their comments are included in the report under paragraph 48. It's recommended that the Cabinet approve the network management plan as appended to the report in front of you today. Thank you, Leader.
Trevor?
Thank you, Leader. Well, Anne has very clearly outlined the fact that we have a network management plan. It is a voluntary one, non-statutory, but nevertheless delivers on the principles of improving the economy of Leicester, the health and well-being of its population, road safety, delivering greater communities and affordable quality and homes. I formally move this motion, Leader, and we are, of course, always working in partnership with on the regional basis, Highways England and Transport for East Midlands, the Midlands Highways Alliance and Quality Freight Partnerships, and the Abnormal Loads Partnerships, of course, as well in local terms, the strategic planning groups working with the LEPs and Leicester and Leicestershire Road Safety Partnership and the HS2 Strategic Board. So, most important document, it was refreshed only in 2014, so here we are again, and of course with the Green Agenda moving on, that is reflected too, and I have already formally moved the motion. Thank you, Leader.
Blake Payne?
I'll second the motion.
Very good. We have no more speakers, so can we have a show of hands in favour of what was moved by Trevor, seconded by Blake? Perfect. Right, if we now move on to a report of the Director of Adults and Communities, who's in charge of the Desford Bomber, the Reed and Sigchrist aircraft, as it's called. Proposal to transfer it to a collection in Newark Air Museum. Can I just say I've had multiple lobbying about this, not most of all from Peter Bedford, obviously the local county councillor, but from Sir Gerald Howarth, 20 or 30 other emails, videos, and in the last half hour, a little online petition. So before we take anyone, I want to give the local member for Desford his moment in the sun. Peter, are you there? Bomber Command, come in.
Thank you, Leader. So first I'd like to thank you, Leader, for giving me the opportunity to address Cabinet on this really important issue for my division. I'd also like to thank Mr Blunt, lead member, for ensuring that this decision comes to Cabinet for a decision. Now, I may know a lot of things about different issues, but I certainly am not an expert on aviation. But as you can see from your agenda pack, the Desford Bomber has a significant historical connection with Desford in my division. I mean, you can even see on our Desford Parish Council, if you can see this, on the street signs, the bomber features on many of the street signs throughout of Desford village. So it really is connected to Desford. So the twin engine aircraft was built as a prototype trainer in 1945, and I guess that's where it takes its name in terms of its connection to Desford. And since 2014, the council has spent £13,500 towards the cost of restoring the aircraft, as well as the partnership with Windmill Aviation, who have also put in significant time and money to ensuring that it can fly again. Now, I received several emails, letters and correspondence from members within Desford Parish, the Parish Council, and also, as the Leader alluded to, an online petition which at the last count was signed by just over 1,300 individuals. So, I mean, many local people are keen to ensure that the Desford Bomber flies again. And on this basis, and the fact that it is has such a historical connection to Desford in my division, I would really like to ask the Cabinet to pause the current transfer of this aircraft to Newark Museum and to leave the aircraft where it is, and for the county council to engage with the parish council in Desford, myself and other stakeholders to explore other options to ensure that the Desford bomber can fly again. And thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Peter. I actually had a video of the Desford bomber actually flying. Only received it yesterday. It's actually a lot smaller than I thought it was, but I certainly had a video of it actually taking off and flying. Can I go to John Wilson first? He's the Director of Adults and Communities, who also happens to have this sort of stuff in his portfolio, in his in his remit. I bet he's regretting that, but where are you?
Thank you, Leader. As Mr. Bedford said, the aircraft was built in 1945 in Desford. It was subsequently rebuilt in 1952 by the Royal Aeronautical Establishment, and it's been in the museum's collection since 1991, originally as a loan, and then was given formal transfer of title in 2005. We had it essentially in pieces for a good few years, and in 2014 we transferred it to Windmill Aviation, who are a specialist light aircraft restorer at Spanhoe Aerodrome in Northamptonshire, for the purposes of restoration, and it's been there ever since. It began successful test flights in 2018, and whilst it doesn't currently have an airworthiness certificate, my understanding is that just in the last few days it's completed its test flights and is now able to obtain an airworthiness certificate should the council wish to do that. I think it's worth saying that there's absolutely no doubt that Windmill Aviation have done a fine job in restoring the aircraft. And we'd want to thank them for their efforts, their time and their resources that they've put in over the course of the last few years. However, it's also worth saying that the council doesn't have space to display such an aircraft at any of its own venues, and we can't provide suitable long-term storage or maintenance for the aircraft. And if the council is to retain it, we would have to continue to store the aircraft in a hangar in Northamptonshire. The museum service has contacted a whole number of other museum organisations and organisations of special interest in aviation, and that led to an offer from Newark Air Museum, who were interested in having the aircraft, and they were also able, as an accredited museum, to look after the aircraft and to put the aircraft on public display. There's clearly been an amount of interest in the transfer of the aircraft, and it's understandable, I guess, that having restored the aircraft to airworthy condition, aeroplane enthusiasts would want to see the aeroplane fly. It's perfectly understandable. And people would want to see it continually to be maintained, and people would want to see it on public display. And that's something that the County Council is not in a position to do. Having said that, it's worth also saying that the costs of maintaining the aircraft in its current location for the time being are manageable. As Mr. Bedford said, we're spending a small amount of money, a few £1,000s each year for storage and maintenance. But it is recommended that a further period of reflection is undertaken in order that we can engage with interested parties and consider the best course of action, given that the aircraft now has completed its trial flights and may well be airworthy fairly soon. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, John. Rich?
Yes, thank you, Nick. I mean, in some ways, this has been a good paper to bring to Cabinet. I know there was some debate about its importance, but when we're dealing with a sort of Second World War bomber of this importance, we've raised the profile. Peter didn't realise quite what that bomber picture was on the parish council signs. He certainly does now. The one thing we can't do is just put it back into a storage shed in Snipston and leave it there in pieces. We've got to find an outcome that gets it to be seen by other people. That applies to all our collections. So I'm glad we're going to look at pausing at the moment, but we can't just put it back into storage. It's either got to go into a museum or be taken over by somebody who can fly it, because we're not in the business of flying vintage aeroplanes. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you. Well, Peter, you've done, you and your cohorts have done such a good job. We're actually going to move a recommendation. Have you got it before you, Peter? Do you know what we're going to be moving?
Hi, Nick. Yes, I do have it somewhere.
Okay.
Mus-
So the motion which I formally move is that in light of the interest shown in the aircraft, the transfer to the Newark Air Museum be paused, Peter. That having been informed that the aircraft has now completed sufficient flying hours so that an application could be made for a certificate of airworthiness, the aircraft now be left with Windmill Aviation, but they be advised that the application for a certificate is a matter for the County Council as the owner of the aircraft. 2, no further flying of the aircraft will be undertaken without insurance conditions being agreed with the County Council, because we can't have it flying around everywhere, as people have pointed out, and maybe being involved in an accident without adequate insurance in place. C, that arrangements be made for officers to meet with Desford Parish Council, and then I put in here, and other interested parties to explain the council's position, in particular that any transfer will be in line with the County Council's collection development policy. Its main objective is that the aircraft is maintained and made available for public access by an accredited museum with specialist expertise in aircraft. We note there is no such facility within Leicestershire. The benefits of displaying the aircraft as a static object should be recognised, and the County Council is not and would not be in a position as the owner of the aircraft to accept the liabilities arising from the aircraft being flown for public display, and that delegated authority be given to the Director of Adults and Communities in consultation, and I've not put my name here, we've put with the leader of the County Council to take a decision on disposal. So we've put it up to the leader. As you know, we've got an election in May, so no matter what happens, this council will always have a leader. So the final decision on where it goes will be for the leader to take. I mean, of course, he can give that job away to his cabinet member, but it's easier to put down the leader. And the one thing we do need to recognise is that we're not in a position as the owner of the aircraft to accept the liabilities arising from the aircraft being flown for public display. That would be too big a financial burden for the people of Leicestershire to want to carry, because you've seen tragically in other instances where aircraft have crashed at public displays, and unluckily they actually crash on the public there at the display. So it's not just the aircraft you need to insure and the man or woman flying it, but it's the people who are standing around looking at it. So with that explanation, I will formally move that motion, and I think Richard, you may second it.
Yes, very happy to second, Mick.
Did you want to add anything, Peter, before we take a vote?
No, just wanted to thank Cabinet for listening to myself and the views of many in the parish of Desford. Thank you.
Well, you've done a damn good job, Peter, that's all I can say. Okay, all in favour, please show. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So agenda item 8, yes it is 8, is the exclusion of the press and public. So if the members of the press and public, which we're going to have to ask to leave now, you can come back for agenda item 9. I asked why we couldn't do 9 before 8, but apparently we have to do something in 8, which enables us to do something in 9. So here we go. I move that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3, 5 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that in all circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. I move. Blake?
I second, Leader.
Okay, now we've got to wait a minute while you members of the So I've got to wait for Matt over here to tell me we're live. Are we live, Matt? Okay, so agenda item 10, East Midlands Development Corporation interim vehicle and Freeport proposal, pages 213 to 236. Can I thank those people that have now rejoined us? I'm sorry we had to drop out there, but we had to take legal advice before we move on. So we're looking for Cabinet's approval for the Council's participation with 4 other local authorities in the establishment of an East Midlands Development Corporation interim vehicle. The report also provides an update on the County Council's work along with other stakeholders to develop a Freeport submission to the government, which encompasses land surrounding East Midlands airports. We've got Simon Lawrence, head of the Growth Unit and Major Programmes, who's going to present. So are you there, Simon? Oh, yes, you're there. Go ahead, Simon.
Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon, Cabinet. This report covers 2 related issues, the proposed East Midlands Development Corporation and the proposal to submit a Freeport proposal. I will deal with the Freeport issue first. In introducing this aspect of the report, I wanted to bring to your attention that at this stage, the final shape of any East Midlands Freeport bid is not known. Recommendation 4G on the Green Order paper provides for some flexibility in that the bids have to be made to government by the 5th of February 2021, and before then, the County Council support or otherwise will be requested. It is important to note that a condition of the Freeport submission is that the local authority, both local planning and highway support, is required. We're working closely with North West Leicestershire District Council and other local planning authorities in Nottinghamshire. Members will be updated in due course. Turning to the other matter of the report, the ambition of the East Midlands Development Corporation is to lead a new era of growth for the regional economy by enabling projects which build directly on the potential of HS2, the region's status as a major trade and logistics gateway, and its historic strengths in research and development and industrial innovation, particularly research and innovation related to emerging low carbon economy. The proposal is that the Development Corporation encompasses 3 sites, the East Midlands Airport in Leicestershire and proposed HS2 station in Towton and the Ratcliffe-on-Stour Power Station, both in Nottinghamshire. However, Cabinet will be aware that the National Infrastructure Commission's report published today proposes for the HS2 line to terminate at East Midlands Parkway and not Towton. The report sets out that to achieve the ambitions of the Development Corporation, there is a need to establish an interim vehicle, to which Lauren referred to just now, given the preferred Development Corporation model requires primary legislation. The interim vehicle would be in the form of a company limited by guarantee and would bring together the 5 directly impacted local authorities, namely ourselves, Nottinghamshire County Council, North West Leicestershire District Council and the boroughs of Rushcliffe and Broxtowe in Nottinghamshire. The report sets out in some detail the legal advice in relation to the establishment of the interim vehicle, and this was covered in that earlier exempt report. I don't propose to cover that in this introduction. However, the report does set out the resource implications and recommends that this council puts forward £500,000 a year for the next 3 years to support the establishment and running of the interim vehicle. This funding is matched by Nottinghamshire County Council, with the 3 districts collectively doing the same. It should be noted, however, that the combined contribution falls considerably short of the total costs estimated to establish and run the interim vehicle, and that a bid for funding to MHCLG is yet to be responded to. Once established, the first key task of the interim vehicle will be to recruit independent directors to the board, to join the local authority nominated non-independent directors, and to develop a business plan. The proposal is not without significant risk, and paragraph 47 refers to the exempt report and the risk table within it, and paragraph 48 summarises those risks, which include the need for MHCLG funding to support the proposal, that changes to the government's HS2 plans for the region would necessitate potentially a review of the broader benefits arising from the Development Corporation. The proposal is that a formal business case is submitted to government in March 2021, setting out the detailed proposition and long-term ambitions of the Development Corporation. and that this document is well advanced. The recommendations are as set out on the Green Order paper.
Good. Well, I've heard lots about this. I'll formally move them. Trevor?
Yeah, yes, Leader, I'm quite comfortable in formally seconding them at this time.
No, I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to speak. Moved by me, seconded by Trevor. All in favour? Thank you very much. Item 11, items referred from overview and scrutiny, there are none. Agenda item 12, any other items which are urgent? There are none. So can I thank you all for attending? Formally wish you Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And can I also place on record, if I speak on behalf of Cabinet's thanks to everyone from the Chief Executive down for the work they've done on behalf of us, the administration of Leicestershire, for the people of Leicestershire. If we can just record that and pass it on to all who either are still working from here or certainly working from home. So thank you very much, and see you all soon.